Hello, well in this video I'm going to be making a cover for this Drawknife, a nice leather cover. At the moment it's got a bit of water pipe over it. Want to say up front, this video's been sponsored by BenQ, who make electronic items. In fact, I have a very nice 4K monitor that I bought with my own money, made by them. They also supplied this very nice light. Now if you want to know more about their BenQ e-reading lights, you can go and look at numerous technical videos on YouTube where people will extol their virtues. I'm going to tease you a tad because I have here some stitching irons, leather stitching irons, which were about £10 for the set, and actually they work perfectly well, pretty good. I also have a set which cost about 18 times as much. Have I gone nuts? Not really. These ones are very nicely finished and they punch in beautifully through my thick belt leather. They extract really easily, and because I'm using them ever such a lot making belts, I think they're worth their money. I accept it is a huge sum to pay, but they are good. And that's really what I'd say about this light. It's an expensive light as lights go. And I think some people will look at the price and think, oh, but if you are doing a lot of work under lights, like studying, reading or craft work, so if you're perhaps, a painter, someone doing pottery or doing leather work, all those sorts of things, having nice lighting stops your eyes getting tired, stops it being so wearing. And this is a clever light. I'll let you look at all the reviews to find out why, but people are very happy who have bought it, and having used it a while now I can see why. So I'll leave it at that at the moment. We'll get on with the project and get cutting out, and I'll talk a bit about the different ways you can do a cover for one of these, and then we'll get on with the sewing. And when we do the sewing I'll show you a couple more features of the light just briefly so you get the idea. Anyway, thanks to BenQ, as I say, for sponsoring. We'll get underway. So I've got a selection of draw knives here, and I just thought I'd show you the covers that one can do. So this one is just a simple bit of wood with a groove down it, and it goes over my blade. And then I have a little bootlace which literally ties around it. It's quite a good cover from the point of view that it sort of holds it all. It's quite secure, and it's safe to transit with that. So I'm quite happy with that sort of kind of cover overall. The wood obviously isn't quite so soft as leather on the blade, but it shouldn't matter too much. That's one kind I've got. Then as I go down in size, I have, this is quite a good design. It's a popper system, and then it has two little rivets each end here. And that's just enough to stop the blade cutting the leather, because the leather is like padded out a bit here. And that seems pretty good. It's a quick, simple way of making a draw knife cover. So that's another one. And then I've got on this one, it's a bit of pipe. And that is not ideal. It's just a bit of water pipe with a slot. Is a little bit hazardous at times, popping it on. It's not completely as I'd like it. So I thought, right, let's make a leather cover. And just for the sake of variety, let's do a cover with a leather welt. So what I'm going to do, it's a nice little bit of stitching, is cut out a U-shaped bit of leather, which will protect the stitches from the sharp blade, so that the stitches don't get cut by the blade. It will all become clearer as we cut out, so we'll get on with the cutting out next. Well, first off, I'm going to make my welt. Now the welt protects the stitches. It basically stops, if that's your line of stitches, it stops the blade cutting them, because it's an extra additional like third layer of leather which gets sandwiched between the two outer pieces of leather and protects those stitches. So don't need much leather for this. I will just draw around my knife blade, just using a silver marking pen, and then I can cut this out. You don't have to be super accurate with this. It could all get trimmed up later. I'm going to extend, because it comes out like a U-shaped piece of leather, I'm going to slightly extend the U-shape underneath these two bits to bring that sharp blade completely away from the leather, because it will then rest on those two U bits. So I just take those up 1/8 of an inch or so. It doesn't need to be much. So I have this like U shape which I can then cut out. So I use my clicker knife. It's the one with a little like bird's beak on it, bird of prey type beak, and it's quite nice for cutting out something like this. I'm cutting on a self-healing cutting mat. So that is my welt, this like U shape, and if I just place it here, you'll see what I mean. I've probably gone a bit too extreme. I'm going to trim it slightly just to get that about there. So it's only a fraction off each side, not very much. 1, 2. Yeah, that's clearing the blade quite nicely, so that's fine. I'm just going to make it slightly slimmer each side so that the cover can get in easily and not be fouled on the handles. So there you are, that's going to fit quite happily. So that's my welt piece. I will now cut out the bottom and the top pieces. And I'll be using some 2mm leather for that. I have a remnant here which is about just over 2mm. So my bottom piece, my welt, put my knife in there. It'll sit roughly like that, and then there'll be this top piece being sewn onto there, and then it will wrap around and be fitted with press studs on there. And I'll obviously trim this to fit accordingly. That's the plan. So what I need to do now is obviously glue my welt onto both pieces, and I also need to do one lot of my press stud holes while this is still sort of not fully glued together. But it'll be easier to do half the press studding now, and then I can easily put the ones on the flap separately once it's all been done, but I need to press stud this side first. So glue wise, you can use any sort of leather craft cement. I'm using a bit of Aquilum 315, which is what I've been using recently on some shoemaking. It's a sort of like a contact glue, but it's water sort of soluble, so it's quite nice and eco-friendly. Again, same thing on this piece. So this is all being glued prior to stitching. I'll try and keep the glue off the top surface, which will probably be a bit of a challenge. Very absorbent on this side, so I'll just give it another little bit of glue. I just press those together, keep them nice and flat, and then just tap them down. final check. Yeah, that's fine. I might just trim the tiniest bit off one of these sides to make it easier to get in and out. Yep, that didn't go through. Yeah, it's a bit better. I think I'll just do the same to the other side actually, just make the entry exit a bit easier. So I've got this then, which I will glue down onto there, and I've just marked where I'm going to be putting my press studs. So I've got it so you press against this steel blade, and it means it's a nice solid surface when you come to join the press studs together. So I've got my press just set up for these poppers. If you don't have a press, you can just use the little hand tools. Those are the hand tools you can use if you don't have a press. They work perfectly okay. The press is probably a bit more accurate as you can adjust the pressure. So that's one. Let's get the other one on. There we are. So those are on there. I can now glue that piece to that piece. And what I'll do, I'll just rough that surface with my scratch awl so it takes the adhesive a bit better. So literally just like that. Just rough it up a bit. The gluing is doing two things really. It's holding it in position for the stitching, but also it does obviously give it a bit more sort of holding power than if you didn't have any glue there at all. And it's dark outside now, but I'm getting a lovely even illumination with my BenQ light, lighting up my desk very nicely. So you can adjust the colour temperature of this light, which may sound odd, but actually for someone like myself who films my craft, is very useful, because I have all my shed lighting here at around about 5700 Kelvin, which is quite a nice working light temperature, and I can dial this in the same on my light. You know, I think that glue's probably gone off enough now. Touch those together. Again, trying not to get glue on the top, which I think I may have just managed, but never mind. And hammer it down. That's good. I can trim the outside of all of this later. Do a quick manipulation, but I've gone a bit off there. There we are. That's better. Right, I'll do just a quick check for that blade is still going to go in. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm after. It's like that. Now this will flap over, so what I can do now is mark where my poppers are going to go and get those in. I should just add, the easiest way of getting the center point for your poppers is literally just to press the lever down. Press it down hard, and I've got a couple of little tiny indents here, so I can punch holes right through the middle of those, and I know then I will have a perfect alignment. So those are in position now, and they'll go over very happily, and they're pressing on the tool, which is what I wanted. So I can now trim this bit of leather so that it fits nicely. So I've just trimmed those round, trimmed it to length, and you can see there that will pop on quite happily. So what I can do next is I can stitch the welt and all the layers together. So I'll be stitching down there, down here, and down there, using some dividers to mark the stitch line. Just keeps everything looking nice and neat. Now, just before I get underway with the stitching, just like to show you this light. One or two things I particularly like about it. And it's very adjustable in all directions. But also, look, you can tilt this head both ways. So you really can get it exactly where you want it. You can adjust the level of brightness, taking it up or down. You can adjust the colour temperature. There's an auto mode, so you can, if you touch it, you can switch it on and off. But also, if you put your finger on there for 2 seconds, you can get it into the ideal sensing position for reading, or do it again and you get it the ideal for using a computer screen. Very smart technology in here. It senses the lighting around you and then it will actually adjust according to. So if you're reading all day, you can obviously get it on the reading mode. If you're using a computer, you can get lovely even lighting for a computer. If, as in my case, you're just doing craft work, then you can leave it as it is and just adjust your colour temperature and your brightness. And it's really nice. It's a large, wide area. It's sort of half as much again compared to a conventional desk lamp. It really does splay out nicely. Very even, very little shadow on here. So as a working craft light, I really like it. Recommend it from that point of view. You will not get so much eye strain with something like this. So yeah, it's a refinement, it's expensive, but it is very nice. I should perhaps also just quickly add, it's very hard to demonstrate a light like this when I'm using a camera which automatically adjusts for different lighting situations. So I think all I can say is, having used it for fine work, I find it very nice, very impressed for craft work. So certainly I would say, if you are wanting better lighting for your craft work, I don't think you would regret something like this. It's a very nice item. Looks stylish as well. Anyway, let's carry on. I must say it is extremely nice working under this lighting. Very diffused. So they are, call it a day there at the moment. All the stitching holes done. So be ready for stitching next. I've just been going around my edges with a skiving knife and having a bit of a clean up. I'll round the edges shortly. I should really have done that before marking my stitching lines, because obviously it's easier to square everything up and then mark your stitching lines. I made life a little bit hard for myself there, but hey. Going to use some nice bright orange thread here. So going to sew around this next, and then it will just be a matter of rounding off my edges, polishing them, and if I want to put some decoration on top, I could do, I suppose. I'll think about that while I'm sewing. So for the sewing bit, it's quite thick leather, so I'm going to go for about 5 times the distance here, and being quite generous, 5 times the length of thread. I don't want to run short. I'd normally say 4 times, but obviously this is getting on for 7mm of leather, so it is a bit thicker, so it's worth having a bit more. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it'll probably be more than I need, but I quite like to try and do it in one stretch if I can. Saddler's clam. You want these to have enough grip to hold your work, but not so much that they tear into it. I line mine with leather. There are plans on my website for making these, and all the proceeds of sale, they're very reasonable, go to charity, to the MDS blood cancer charity. So if you fancy a project, there are 2 different styles of clam. There's this steam bent one and a more straightforward one, but both very useful for the leather work. Holds your work, makes it a lot easier as you're sewing. So I'm doing the usual 2 needle saddle stitch here, and I have put other videos up on how I do that. So that's it with the stitching on. A little bit of thread left, actually I might have got away with 4 times. Anyway, I will now hammer that down to sink it all in nicely and to close up my holes properly. So I'm just going around the inside as well. So I'm just going to put a bit of toconol on the edges. Being a sort of natural veg tan, it's a bit more sort of tricky, because I don't want it staining everything horribly. Just using a slicker now, and I'm just generally trying to clean these up a bit. I really need a clean slicker, which I haven't got down here at the moment. It's in the house, but never mind. I'm just going to apply a bit of snow-proof waterproofing. I'll just seal this leather. It will naturally patinate and get chips, etc. And I guess it's now time for the actual test, the acid test. Does it fit? So I'll get rid of that bit of water pipe. I won't be sorry to see the back of that. Pop the knife in and it sits very happily. Pop it over. And hey presto, one nice little cover. So that will hold that very securely. And yeah, one draw knife cover. So I think the main thing to bear in mind when you do one of these, put a welt in, so then you'll protect your stitches, because the blade can't cut into your stitches. If you make your sides a little bit higher, you can then keep the blade above the leather as well, just fractionally, and that will help as well. There's a nice little draw knife, little gents draw knife, this one. Useful for spoons and things like that, so it's nice to have a proper cover for it, and it can go into my tool bag. Finally, just for a bit of fun, I thought, as I live near Noel Park with lots of reindeer, I'd put a nice little deer there. So that's just stamped in with a little stamp there. You can hammer those and get a nice impression. And that somehow just makes it a little bit more individual. Bit of fun. Someone will look at that in years to come and think, oh, I wonder what's the history of that one. But there you are. Well, I enjoyed making that, and it's been an absolute pleasure also working under this very nice BenQ e-reader light. Very nice light. So thank you very much to BenQ for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks very much for watching. Bye then.